Mom forced me to give my college fund to my brother, so I taught her a lesson. Sometimes I wonder if I was ever really her daughter, or just an inconvenience she had to deal with. Growing up, I didn't think much about it. I assumed all families had favorites, that all kids had to work a little harder to be noticed. But looking back now, I realize the truth was much harsher than that. Before we continue this story, tell me first, where are you watching from? I'd love to know. Drop your country or city in the comments. Now, let's go back to the story. The first time I understood my place in the family, I was 8 years old. It was a small moment, but it stuck with me. My mom was in the kitchen, cutting a cake for my brother's birthday. He was turning 6 and he got a party. Balloons, presents, cousins running around the house. I stood by the counter, watching her slice perfect, even pieces, when I finally gathered the courage to ask, "Mom, can I have a birthday party too this year?" She didn't even look up. "We'll see." I knew what that meant. We wouldn't. At the time, I didn't understand why it hurt so much. It was just a party, right? But when you're a kid, little things like that tell you where you stand. And I was starting to realize that my place in the family was different from Jacob's. I tried to believe it was because money was tight. But that excuse fell apart when my brother got everything he wanted. Every year, his birthday was a big deal. And mine was, well, just another day. When his birthday came, my mom planned for weeks. His favorite food, his favorite cake, the theme he wanted that year. He got new clothes to wear, and our relatives came over with gifts. When my birthday came, I got a plain store-bought cake. No decorations, no gifts, except maybe something small from my aunt. Sometimes my mom even forgot it was my birthday until the last minute. I don't know when I stopped asking for things. Maybe it was when I realized my school projects were always done last minute, while my mom spent weeks helping my brother with his. Maybe it was when I noticed how she only bragged about him to relatives, while my achievements were brushed aside with a dismissive, "Yeah, Elena's doing fine." Or maybe it was the day I found out about the college fund. I had always known we weren't rich, so I worked hard in school, hoping for scholarships. I wanted to make things easier for my mom. I thought if I could just prove I was responsible and independent, maybe she would finally see me the way she saw Jacob. But one day, I overheard my aunt asking my mom about my future plans. "She'll be fine," my mom said. "She's smart. She'll figure it out." "But doesn't Elena have a college fund like Jacob?" my aunt pressed. I held my breath. There was a pause. Then my mother's voice, casual as ever. "Oh, that money is for Jacob. He's going to need it more than she does." It felt like a punch to the stomach. She had been saving for him, not me. At first I thought maybe I misheard. Maybe she meant something else. I wanted so badly to believe that. But the way she said it, so dismissive, as if my future wasn't even a consideration, made my chest tighten. Later that night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying those words in my head. He's going to need it more than she does. I told myself it wasn't a big deal, that I'd figure it out, like she said, that I'd work hard, get a scholarship, and prove to her that I didn't need anything from her. But a part of me, the part that was still just a kid wanting her mom's love, shattered a little that day. I wish I could say that was the only time I felt like I didn't belong, but it was just the beginning. As I got older, the favoritism became more obvious. Jacob wanted to play soccer. He got brand new cleats, a full uniform, and my mom drove him to practice every weekend. I wanted to join the art club. She told me it was a waste of time and money. When Jacob struggled in school, my mom hired a tutor. When I struggled in math, she told me to figure it out myself. And the worst part? I tried. I really tried to make her proud. I stayed late at school to study, joined clubs that I thought would impress her, kept my grades up. But no matter how hard I worked, it was never enough. She never noticed, never cared. One night, when I was about 13, I decided to test something. I told my mom I got an award at school. Best in English. It wasn't a lie. It was a real award. I had worked hard for it. She barely looked up from her phone. "Oh, that's nice. Did you take the chicken out of the freezer?" That was it. No congratulations, no smile, nothing. The next week, Jacob came home with a participation trophy from soccer. My mom practically threw a party. She called our relatives, posted about it on Facebook, took him out for ice cream. I remember sitting in my room that night, staring at my own award on the shelf, wondering why I even bothered. I don't think I cried. I think I just felt numb. That was the night I stopped trying to impress her. But even though I gave up on her approval, I still had hope that maybe, just maybe, she'd come through for me when it really mattered. That hope wouldn't last long, because the ultimate betrayal was just around the corner. And this time, I wasn't going to let it go. I used to think that if I worked hard enough, my mom would see me. That if I kept my head down, did what I was supposed to do, and never caused trouble, she'd finally notice me the way she noticed Jacob. I was wrong. By the time I turned 16, I had stopped expecting much from her. I had my own routine. Wake up early, go to school, study hard, and come home without expecting a warm meal or a "how was your day?" I had learned to take care of myself. Jacob, on the other hand, had everything handed to him. He barely lifted a finger around the house. If I didn't wash the dishes, they'd stay in the sink until I gave in. If I didn't clean up after dinner, my mom would sigh and say, "Elena, can you just do it? You know your brother is tired." Tired? He sat around playing video games all day, but I was the one who had to keep things together. I worked a part-time job at a local coffee shop after school. It wasn't much, but it gave me a little independence. I saved every extra penny I earned, knowing I'd need it for college. My dream was to leave home as soon as I turned 18, to finally be free of the constant feeling of being unwanted. One evening, after a long shift, I came home to find Jacob sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. My mom was in the kitchen, talking on the phone with my aunt. I walked past them, heading to my room, when I heard my name. "Elena's just going to have to help out," my mom was saying. "It's not fair to put all the pressure on Jacob." I froze. "What do you mean?" my aunt asked. I stepped closer, my heart pounding. "Well, we've decided that Jacob will use the college fund. He deserves a good education, and honestly, Elena's always been independent. She'll manage." She said it like it was nothing, like my future was just an afterthought. The words sank in like a stone in my stomach. Jacob glanced at me from the couch, looking almost guilty, but not guilty enough to say anything. My voice came out before I could stop it. "You're giving my college fund to him?" My mom turned around, startled. She hadn't realized I was there. But instead of looking ashamed, she just sighed like I was being dramatic. "Elena, don't start," she said, pinching the bridge of her nose. "Jacob is going to need it more than you. You're a smart girl. You'll figure something out." I stared at her, barely able to process what she was saying. "I've worked my entire life to get into a good school. I planned for this, and you're just giving it away?" She set down her phone, looking annoyed. "Jacob's future is important too." "So is mine!" My voice cracked. "Why do I always have to come second? Why do I always have to sacrifice?" My mom exhaled sharply, like she was tired of explaining something obvious. "Because you can handle it, Elena. You always do. You don't need help the way he does." I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make her see how unfair this was. But deep down, I knew she never would. Jacob had everything handed to him, and I was expected to just accept it. I was supposed to be the strong one, the one who didn't need anything. But I did. I needed something. I needed to matter. Instead, I walked past her, straight to my room, and slammed the door. For the first time in a long time, I cried. Not because of the money, not because of the college fund, but because I finally understood something I had been avoiding for years. No matter how hard I worked, no matter what I did, I was never going to be enough for her. I was never going to be Jacob. And in her eyes, that meant I wasn't worth investing in. I barely slept that night. My mind raced with questions, plans, desperate ideas of how to fix this. Should I confront her again? Should I beg? Should I go to my aunt and see if she could talk some sense into her? But the next morning, as I looked at myself in the mirror, eyes swollen from crying, a different thought took root. What if I didn't try to fix it? What if, for once in my life, I stopped trying to prove myself to someone who would never care? And what if, instead, I taught her a lesson she would never forget? Because I wasn't going to let her take away my future, not without a fight. The next few days I played along. I didn't argue. I didn't bring up the college fund again. I let my mom believe I had accepted it, that I was just going to figure something out, like she always said. Meanwhile, I started making my own plans. First, I talked to my school counselor. I told her everything, how I had worked for years to get into college, how I had been promised a fund that was now being taken away. I didn't expect much, but to my surprise, she actually listened. "Elena, you're a top student," she said. "There are scholarships available, and you could also look into financial aid." That gave me hope. Maybe I didn't need my mom's money at all. Maybe I could do this on my own. But I wasn't done yet. Because if my mom thought I was just going to accept this without consequences, she was wrong. Over the next few weeks, I slowly started pulling away. I stopped doing the chores she expected me to do. If the dishes piled up, I let them sit there. If the laundry wasn't done, I didn't touch it. Jacob started complaining first. "Mom, why isn't Elena cleaning up?" My mom turned to me with that familiar, exasperated look. "Elena, can you just—" "No," I said simply. "Jacob can figure it out." Her eyes widened. "Excuse me?" "I'm tired," I said, repeating the excuse she had used for him so many times before. "I have things to focus on. He can handle it." She didn't know how to respond to that, and that was just the beginning. One evening, when she asked me to pick up groceries, I said, "Sorry, I have a shift at work." "But Jacob can do it," I interrupted, grabbing my bag. Her face turned red. "Elena, don't talk back to me." "I'm not," I said calmly. "I'm just doing what you taught me. Jacob's future is important, right? So he can start taking responsibility for himself." For the first time, I saw something flicker in her expression, something that almost looked like doubt. But I wasn't done yet, because I had one final move left. One that would make sure she never forgot the lesson I was about to teach her. And this time, it wouldn't be me making the sacrifices. This time, she was going to learn what it felt like to be the afterthought. For years, I had been the one making sacrifices. I had been the one cleaning up after everyone, being the responsible one, the afterthought. But not anymore. If my mother wanted to give my future away to Jacob, then fine. She could deal with the consequences. At first, my quiet rebellion confused her. She wasn't used to me saying no. She wasn't used to me putting myself first. And for a while, she thought it was just a phase, some teenage attitude that would pass. But it wasn't. One evening, about 2 weeks after I found out about the college fund, my mom came into my room, arms crossed. "Elena, the bills are due, and I need your paycheck this week." I didn't even blink. "No." Her expression darkened. "Excuse me?" "I'm saving for college," I said, looking her right in the eye. "You said I'd figure it out, right?" "Well, I am." Her lips thinned. "You're being selfish." That word made me want to laugh. Selfish? After everything I had given up? No, I said, my voice steady. I'm just done being your backup plan. She scoffed. This family needs to support each other. You can't just decide to stop helping. Then why does Jacob get a free ride? I shot back. Why does he get my college fund? Why doesn't he have to contribute? My mother's face twisted in frustration. Because he's not as strong as you, she snapped. He needs help. I shook my head. No, he just knows you'll always clean up his mess for him, and I'm done doing the same. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. But I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't backing down. That was just the beginning. A few days later, the real fallout started. Without me taking care of everything, the house quickly descended into chaos. The dishes piled up. The laundry sat in baskets, unwashed. The fridge started looking empty because I wasn't the one remembering to do the grocery shopping. Jacob complained first. Mom, there's nothing to eat. She shot me a look, expecting me to fix it. I just shrugged. Guess you should go shopping. Jacob scoffed. That's your job. Not anymore. For the first time in his life, my brother was forced to lift a finger, and he hated it. Mom, tell her she has to do something, he whined. My mother rubbed her temples, frustrated. Elena, can you just… No, I interrupted. I'm busy. It was like a switch had flipped in my brain. I no longer cared if she was angry. I no longer cared if Jacob complained. For the first time, I was choosing myself, and it felt good. But I still had one final move left. If she wanted to take my college fund away, I was going to make sure she regretted it. The next week, I met with my school counselor again. You have excellent grades, she told me. You should apply for as many scholarships as possible. I did exactly that. I spent hours filling out applications, writing essays, gathering recommendations. One day, as I sat at the kitchen table, typing away on my laptop, my mother walked by. What are you doing? She asked. Applying for scholarships, I said without looking up. She scoffed. You're wasting your time. Do you know how competitive those are? I finally met her gaze. I'd rather try than sit around waiting for someone to hand me something I didn't earn. Her face twitched at that, but she didn't respond. I kept applying. And then, a few weeks later, I got my first acceptance. I had won a partial scholarship to a great school. It wasn't everything, but it was enough to give me hope. That night, I printed out the email and left it on the kitchen counter, right where my mom would see it. I wanted her to know that I didn't need her help, that I was getting out of this house, whether she liked it or not. Things got even worse between us after that. She tried to guilt-trip me, saying that family should stick together. She tried to make me feel like I was abandoning them, but I knew better now. One night, she cornered me in the hallway. Elena, do you really think you'll be better off without us? I met her gaze, feeling years of hurt rise to the surface. I think I already am. She didn't have an answer for that. The final breaking point came when I received my financial aid package. It covered nearly everything. I was getting out. I came home that evening, clutching the acceptance letter in my hands. My heart pounded as I stepped inside. My mom and Jacob were sitting in the living room. I cleared my throat. I got into college, I announced, and I got financial aid. I leave in August. Silence. Then, my mother laughed. And how are you going to afford the rest? You think you can just survive on your own? I smiled. Yes. Her face twisted in anger. You're making a mistake. I shook my head. No, I'm making a choice. She stood up, her voice rising. After everything I've done for you. I cut her off. Everything you've done for me. I let out a breathless laugh. You mean ignoring me? Favoring Jacob? Taking away my future and expecting me to be okay with it? She crossed her arms. You'll come crawling back. I looked her in the eye. No, I won't. And I meant it. The day I left was the most freeing moment of my life. I packed my bags, said goodbye to the house that had never felt like home, and walked away without looking back. My mother didn't try to stop me. Jacob barely acknowledged I was leaving. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty about putting myself first. Because I had finally learned the most important lesson of all. Some people will never change. And the real question isn't why don't they love me the way I deserve? The real question is, why did I wait so long to leave? I don't know how my mom and Jacob are doing now. And for the first time in my life, I don't care. Leaving home should have been terrifying. I should have felt anxious, uncertain, afraid of the unknown. But as I stepped onto campus, dragging my worn-out suitcase behind me, all I felt was relief. For the first time, I was in control of my life. No more walking on eggshells, no more feeling like I was never enough. Still, the weight of everything I had left behind clung to me. I told myself I wouldn't look back, that I wouldn't let my mother or Jacob haunt my thoughts. But cutting off a toxic family isn't as easy as packing a bag and walking away. They find ways to pull you back in. The first message came 2 weeks after I moved into my dorm. Mom, you haven't called. I stared at the text for a long time, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I hadn't called because I didn't want to, because I didn't owe her anything. But part of me, the old part, the one that had spent years trying to please her, felt a flicker of guilt. I forced myself to put my phone down. I wasn't going to fall back into that trap. Then came Jacob. Unlike Mom, he didn't bother with guilt trips. He went straight for the demands. Jacob, can you send me money? No hello. No how are you? Just an expectation, like always. I stared at my screen, almost laughing at the audacity. He still thought I was there to clean up after him. I typed out a response. Elena, no. Simple, final. His reply came immediately. Jacob, wow. Nice to know you don't care about your family. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to breathe. This was exactly why I had left. I turned off my phone and threw it onto my bed. I wouldn't let them drag me back into their world. I was done. But they weren't. A month later, I was walking back from my last class of the day when my phone buzzed with an incoming call. I almost ignored it until I saw my aunt's name on the screen. She never called me. A knot formed in my stomach as I answered. Hello? Elena. Her voice was tight, urgent. It's your mom. My heart stuttered. What about her? She was in an accident. The world around me seemed to tilt. What? She's in the hospital. It was a car crash. She's stable, but... My aunt hesitated. She asked for you. I didn't know what to say. For years, all I had wanted was for my mother to want me, to need me the way she needed Jacob. And now, she finally did. But did I owe her that? Did I owe her anything? I spent the night turning the question over in my mind. My mother was in the hospital. She wanted me there. And despite everything, some part of me still wanted to be the good daughter. But then I thought about everything else. How she had stolen my future without a second thought. How she had always made me feel like I wasn't enough. And suddenly, I had my answer. The next morning, I called my aunt. I'm not coming, I said. She was silent for a long moment. Elena, I know she's made mistakes, but... She didn't make mistakes, I interrupted. She made choices. And now I'm making mine. I could hear the disappointment in my aunt's sigh. She's still your mother. No, I said, my voice steady. She's just the woman who raised me. And that was the last time I spoke to any of them. The weeks passed, and slowly, the weight of my past started to lift. I focused on school, on building a life that was mine. I made friends who actually cared about me. I worked hard, not because I had to prove myself to anyone, but because I wanted to. For the first time, I was free. One night, as I was finishing an assignment, my phone buzzed with a notification. An email. From my mother. My stomach twisted as I opened it. The message was short. Elena, I hope you're happy. You abandoned us when we needed you most. But I shouldn't be surprised. You've always been selfish. Don't bother coming back. I stared at the words, letting them sink in. The old me would have cried. The old me would have felt guilty, would have agonized over what I had done wrong. But the new me? I felt nothing. I deleted the email without replying, and just like that, I was free. I don't know how my mother is doing now. I don't know if Jacob ever got his act together, if he ever learned to stand on his own 2 feet. And for the first time in my life, I don't care. Some people will never change. And the best decision I ever made was realizing I didn't have to wait around for them to. Because I finally understood something. Family isn't about blood, it's about who shows up. And I was finally showing up for myself. The moment I deleted my mother's email, something inside me shifted. It wasn't just relief, it was closure. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for her to change. I wasn't hoping for an apology that would never come. I was done. But cutting ties with family doesn't mean the past disappears overnight. It lingers in the quiet moments, in the habits you don't even realize you've picked up. I had spent so many years trying to earn love that I didn't know who I was without that struggle. Now, I had to figure that out. At first, it felt strange not having anyone to check in with. Other students called their parents on the weekends. They went home for holidays, talked about their siblings, shared stories about home. I had nothing to share. I could have made up something, pretended my family was distant but supportive, that my mom sent me care packages and asked how I was doing. But I refused to lie. Instead, when people asked about my family, I just shrugged. It's complicated, I'd say. And that was enough. It wasn't until Thanksgiving break that I truly felt the weight of being on my own. Most of my friends were leaving campus to visit their families. One by one, I watched them pack their bags and head home. I stayed behind. It was my first holiday alone. No family dinner, no forced conversations. Just me. I could have felt sorry for myself. I could have let the loneliness creep in. But instead, I decided to make it something different. I ordered takeout from my favorite restaurant. I put on a movie I had always wanted to watch but never had time for. I curled up under a blanket with a book. For the first time, the holidays weren't about obligation. They were about me. And that felt good. But just when I thought I was finally moving on, my past found a way to catch up with me. It started with a phone call. I didn't recognize the number, but something in my gut told me to answer. Elena? I froze. I hadn't heard that voice in months. It was Jacob. What do you want? I asked, my voice flat. He sighed. Look, I know you hate us, but Mom's not doing great. She's struggling with money. She needs help. I clenched my jaw. Of course she did. She told me not to bother with you, he continued. Said you didn't care about us anymore, but I thought I'd try anyway. I almost laughed. The irony of it all. My mother, the woman who had taken everything from me, now struggling because I wasn't there to clean up her mess. It wasn't satisfying, though. It was just sad. I exhaled slowly. Jacob, I don't hate you. I just don't owe you anything. She's our mom, he argued. She raised us. No, I said firmly. She raised you. She used me. He was quiet for a long time. So that's it? You're just gonna let her suffer? I didn't answer right away, because the truth was, I had already made my decision. Yes, I finally said. I am. And then I hung up. After that call, I expected to feel guilty, but I didn't. I felt free. For years, I had been the one making sacrifices. I had been the one expected to fix everything. But not anymore. My mother had made her choice when she took away my future and gave it to Jacob. She had made her choice every time she put me second. Now, I was making mine. And I was choosing myself. The next few months passed in a blur of classes, late-night study sessions, and quiet moments of healing. I was doing well. Better than I had ever expected. I got a part-time job tutoring, which helped me stay afloat financially. I joined a few campus clubs, made new friends, built a life that had nothing to do with my past. Slowly, the scars my family had left on me began to fade. But there were still moments when the pain crept in. Like the time I overheard a classmate complaining about how overprotective their mom was. She won't stop calling me, they groaned. She checks in like every day. It's so annoying. I had smiled, but inside I felt hollow. I would never have that problem. Or the time a friend invited me to spend Christmas with their family, and I realized I had nothing. No traditions, no home waiting for me. The loneliness wasn't constant, but it was there, lurking in the background. A reminder of everything I had lost. One night, as I sat alone in my dorm, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. There weren't many. My mother had never been the sentimental type. But I found one from years ago. A rare picture of me, Jacob, and my mom. I stared at it, trying to remember if we had been happy that day. If there had ever been a time when things were different. Maybe, but I would never know for sure. I hesitated, then did something I hadn't expected. I deleted the photo. Not out of anger, not out of spite. But because I didn't need it anymore. I wasn't that girl in the picture. I had spent my whole life waiting for my mother to love me the way I deserved. But I didn't need her love anymore. I had something better. I had myself. Some people will never change. Some wounds never fully heal. But the best thing I ever did was walk away, because for the first time, I wasn't the forgotten child. I wasn't the one left behind. I was the one who saved herself. And that was enough. The day I graduated, I stood in my cap and gown, looking out over the sea of students and their families. Mothers and fathers beamed with pride. Siblings held up homemade signs. Groups posed for pictures, capturing a moment they'd cherish forever. And then there was me, alone. But I wasn't sad. For years I had imagined this day. I had once thought that if I worked hard enough, if I proved myself, maybe my mother would finally see me. Maybe she would show up, hug me, tell me she was proud. But now, I knew better. She wasn't here, and that was okay. Because I had made it without her. After the ceremony, I wandered through the crowd, watching my classmates celebrate with their families. I should have felt out of place, but I didn't. Hey, there you are! I turned to see Rachel, one of my closest friends, waving me over. Her parents stood beside her, smiling warmly. "You're coming to dinner with us, right?" she asked. I hesitated. "I don't want to intrude." Rachel rolled her eyes. "Please. My mom already considers you part of the family." Her mother nodded. "We'd love to have you, Elena." I felt a lump form in my throat. For so long, I had believed that family was something I would never have. that it was something I had lost the moment I walked away from my mother and Jacob. But maybe family wasn't about blood. Maybe it was about the people who showed up. Dinner was warm and chaotic in the best way. Rachel's younger brother complained about his teachers. Her dad cracked terrible jokes. Her mom made sure my plate was full, fussing over me like I was her own daughter. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged. And for the first time, I let myself believe that I deserved it. In the weeks that followed, I prepared for the next chapter of my life. I had a job lined up in a new city. A fresh start. I packed my things, donated what I didn't need, and booked a one-way ticket. As I zipped up my suitcase, my phone buzzed with a notification. An email. From my mother. For a moment, I considered deleting it without reading it, but then I thought, no. I want to see what she has to say. I opened it. Elena, I heard you graduated. I suppose congratulations are in order. I hope you don't expect me to be happy for you after everything you've done. After the way you abandoned us. You think you're better than us, but you'll see. One day, you'll fall. And when you do, don't come crawling back to me. I stared at the words, waiting for the sting, but it never came. Instead, I felt nothing. I had once craved her approval so badly. I had once believed that if I was perfect enough, she would love me. But now, I saw her for what she was. Bitter, angry, and powerless. She no longer had control over me. I took a deep breath, then deleted the email. Not out of spite, not out of anger, but because I had finally truly let go. Moving to a new city was terrifying. I had never lived completely on my own before. I had no safety net, no family to fall back on. But that also meant I had nothing holding me back. I threw myself into my new job, determined to build a life that was entirely mine. I explored the city, found coffee shops I loved, decorated my tiny apartment with things that made me happy. I made friends. I built a life. And little by little, the past stopped haunting me. One day, as I sat in a park with Rachel on a rare day off, she turned to me and said, "You seem different." I raised an eyebrow. Different how? She shrugged. Happier. Lighter. I thought about that for a moment. I had spent so many years carrying the weight of my mother's expectations, of Jacob's entitlement, of the belief that I wasn't enough. But now I had put that weight down, and I wasn't going to pick it up again. I smiled. Yeah, I think I am. Years passed. I built a career I was proud of. I traveled. I laughed. I loved. I never looked back. My mother and Jacob became ghosts of a life I no longer lived. Sometimes people asked if I ever thought about reconnecting with them. And maybe, in another life, I would have. But not in this one. Some people will never change. And I had finally learned that I didn't have to wait for them to. Because I had changed. I had grown. And I had built a life worth living, without them. I don't know where they are now. I don't know if my mother still resents me, if Jacob ever learned to stand on his own 2 feet. But I do know this. I don't feel guilty. Not anymore, because I finally understand something I wish I had known years ago. Family isn't about blood. It's about love. And I have plenty of that in my life. Just not from them. And that's okay. Because I am okay. I am free. I am happy. And that's all that matters. Looking back, I used to think that if I just tried hard enough, if I was good enough, my mother would finally love me the way I needed her to. But some people will never change. And the real lesson? You don't have to wait for them to. Walking away wasn't easy. It took years of pain, disappointment, and finally acceptance. But it was the best thing I ever did. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't sacrificing myself for someone else. I chose me. And I don't regret it. Not every family is built on love. But that doesn't mean you have to stay trapped in their expectations, their manipulation, or their toxicity. You have the power to break free. And trust me, on the other side of that freedom is a life you actually want to live. So now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from family? Was there a moment when you realized they would never change? Share your story. And if you made this far, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more stories like this, and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the best thing you can do is choose yourself.